Yeah, Mel, what you're seeing there with the aggregation, you know, another good indicator of healthy soils, you start to see aggregation at the surface. This color change, you get accumulation, because what happens when you till, that all gets mixed up in the top, whatever depth you're tilling it, be plowing it at 6, 8 inches, if not. But go ahead, Will.
Exactly. You know, in the top 3 to 4 inches here, we're starting to see some aggregation, and you can see the size of these aggregates based on the size of that pencil. And we're seeing living roots. These white roots, these are living roots that may be from the cotton plant or some of these older roots here that were from the previous cover crop. So that is one of the things that's providing the sugars and the food source for this biological system that's alive here in the rhizosphere. And as we move down to depth, we still have some root, but we don't have as significant aggregation as we do in the top layers. And as we move on down, because this is actually a sandy clay loam, there's a little bit of clay content there, somewhere around 20 to 30% at the most. Somewhere about 40 to 50 on the sands, and we have a few silts in there as well. This soil has a very good infiltration rate. If we look at our soil survey for Halifax County, it has an infiltration rate of about 1.5 inches per hour. If we go to other areas, it has probably less than 1/10 of an inch per hour. But the infiltration rate probably has doubled or tripled based on the management aspects that Zeb has done here in this field.
So I guess the question is, you're not getting, the deeper in the profile, that's really almost a structureless soil.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because
yes, sir.
And you're creating the aggregates, which I don't know, would you call this an aggregate? Those aggregates?
Yes, and if we were to put this in a jar of water or something, there's probably quite a bit of stability to that aggregate based on the biological structure that had put the glomalin or the proteins and glues that are holding these soil particles together. So yeah, I would consider that a water stable.
So we're out here, Zeb's farmers are looking at it, we look at residue, we look at the color. If you're seeing good color, you start to see accumulation, you're starting to see some of the aggregates. Tell me a little bit about what the roots tell me about healthy soils. How does root growth through the profile tell you whether you're doing things right or not?
Well, with this cotton plant here, of course, we have a lot of lateral roots, but is we run into compaction layers, especially at times we'll see some J roots or a root that has a J form to it. We don't really see that. A lot of this sometimes in soils that are not as well managed as these, we don't have much of a taproot. We'll see a lot of these upper areas, and that's due to the water table. These here in eastern North Carolina, we are on the seasonal high water table. So in the wintertime or dormant season, we have a water table that's less than a foot below our feet, about 12 inches into the soil. So how that water profile draws down in the springtime determines on the rooting depth early on in the season. And the other thing, for this area, we had a tremendously dry July that limited a lot of that root growth as well. As we can see, these roots are starting to pick up. We don't see any particular signs of compaction, and we can see it moving out to the row middles themselves. And of course, the dry weather probably had a huge influence on that because of the residue. It kept that moisture in the profile. It kept it cool, because we saw soil temperatures, they can vary as much as 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit by having that residue on that. And so these roots are just like us. They're moving to where it's moisture or where it's cooler and a better growing climate. The other thing is the roots also will determine where the biology is, you know, because the biology can't make it without the plant, and the plant can't make it without the biology. So it's a cohabitation in this.
So roots grow straight till they hit some surface, okay,
yes, sir,
that restricts it. Let's
sir.
talk a little bit about, so a farmer can go out and evaluate the roots of a living plant. They can look at their cover crop roots, and that'll give them that indicator. Again, the key here, they're looking for how straight the root's growing, how diverse it is around the plant. I don't know, Zeb, you got anything else that you look at?
I mean, I'll go out and check when we've got cover crops growing and just dig roots for fun, because that's fun to me. And I mean, I've dug rye seedlings that were 3 inches tall. that had, 12 inches worth of root, 14 inches of root underneath that seedling. And that was probably before I broke it off. That's what I was able to get on the spade and then wash off. If we've got that kind of root growth on a 3-inch rye seedling, just think what we're able to do if we let that get up, to 4 feet on top of the ground. Think of what we've got underneath that ground that's opening up root channels to allow our cotton roots and our cash crop roots to go farther in and access not only moisture but nutrients that are in that soil profile. I mean, that's opening up a lot of stuff that's accessible to us if we weren't doing that.
Yeah, all the biomass measurements we do are just about above ground material. What would be a rule of thumb for how much? So if I got 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of biomass above the ground, how much would I potentially have below the ground?
David, everything I've always been told and kind of what I've seen is that it's at least a 1-for-1. So if you've got 5,000 pounds an acre above ground, you've got at least that much below ground as well in roots. And I think we're discovering more and more as far as the biology and a healthy soil goes. It's those roots that really drive it, not so much what we're seeing above ground. The above ground stuff is a benefit to me as far as helping with moisture, soil temperatures, like what Will said, and also cutting back on the herbicides that we're able to use or that we have to use through controlling weeds with this residue. But as far as the life in the soil is concerned, it's that relationship with the roots that really matters.
Okay, good. Let's talk about compaction. I want to see you dig a hole, or one of the things, compaction is just that area where the roots can do that. You want to get a
Barrett, if you want to
Yeah. I'm going to stop.
So Zeb, I didn't see you get a running start to shove that in the ground. That went in for what day? We're in last day of August.
August
31st of August.
Yeah, would you have normally been able to do that?
On most of our stuff now, yes.
What about
10 years ago, no sir, not really. And you can see, I was hoping to find, you can see right there's a really nice channel.
Oh yeah.
That's showing why we can do that and why it's so easy to push a shovel or whatever you're trying to push in. You can see we've got an earthworm channel there. We've got some living roots here that are helping to make this soil as easy as it is to work.
Are you seeing any pill bugs or centipedes or any of those kinds of things?
We saw one earlier.
As you brush back the residue, you ought to be able to see some evidence.
Evidence of earthworm castings right here and all along here. This is evidence that during the cooler times of the day, these earthworms are coming to the top, and basically they're processing that soil. Those aggregates are very stable as far as improving fertility of the soil from an agronomic standpoint. And all that's possible because of this residue.
So those casts are right next to the root system? Aren't casts kind of nutrient dense as far as NP and K?
Absolutely.
We've got it.
Absolutely. Very dense. Just about a perfect pH. And as far as fertility, a lot of phosphorus and potassium's there.
Now, how many, Will, how many earthworms should I have? Can I have too many?
No. No.
How many would be a good number for a field? How do I know I have a good population versus I didn't have any?
Well, ideally, you would want one for every spade full of soil that you dig up. Now, we see evidence. We haven't physically seen an earthworm in that spade full that Zeb has dug here, but there's certainly evidence that they've been here. If we could have at least one per square foot, I think we would be on the right track. In a conventional till field that has not had this treatment, you'll walk an entire field and never see an earthworm. And of course, outside of tillage, there's other practices as well that improve it as far as keeping something living on the land all the time. And sometimes fertility and pesticide usage can have some Yep, there's an earthworm channel right there at the end of that pencil.
So a big hole like that, doesn't that let water soak in the ground?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Plus, it helps with the root structure as well, as far as cover crop or a row crop.
So you provide the place for a root to go down.
Absolutely.
We're okay. So,
but it was tiny.
So again,
There's
if that interface
right
between there, so farmers can do this if they're out there. If you're not seeing any earthworms, then maybe they need to come see you at the Soil and Water District office and talk about how they can change their management.
Absolutely.
Around there. Now I've heard, this sounds kind of silly, but I heard you can kind of tell a little bit as you walk across the healthy soil, you kind of got a little spring, got a little bounce to it.
Yes.
Because you got that aggregation that's kind of lifting the soil. You got got that nice cover crop mat. So it's not like walking across the parking lot that a lot of our fields can turn into later on there.
One thing about fields that receive this type of management in the wintertime, we're able to get on the field without equipment getting stuck. A lot of times, as Zeb spoke about earlier, we don't have any standing water, so the field really acts like a sponge. We see it more evident in the wintertime than in the summertime, the benefits of the soil health.
Zeb, do you have much trouble with rutting? That's a good question. And what do you do if you do get, because I'm sure there's been years you've had issues.
Yes, sir. We don't have anywhere near the issues with rutting and field traffic as we have in the past. Since we've gone away from using a strip till rig on the majority of our acres and relying more on the covers, and then the longer that we've been in a cover system, being able to get back on the fields after we have a rain event, we can get back in a lot quicker. And what I guess what I've seen is, as far as rutting or having an issue with cutting down in a field with a piece of equipment, it seems that you cut down to the depth of your tillage. You know, if I run a ripping shank 12 inches deep and I fall into that ripping slip later in the year, I'm going down about 12 inches to the bottom of that ripping slip. If I run a disc and I cut it 4 or 6 inches deep, and we have a rain event and we come back out, I'm gonna mar down until I hit that compaction layer at the bottom of that tillage. So, it seems to me that if we're making ruts, unless it's extremely wet, you're really cutting down to the depth of your tillage.
One thing I've had a farmer tell me, Will, is he's noticed he had some cobweb type of material down on the residue, and he was kind of concerned about that. You got any idea what that might be, or?
That's typically a fungal hyphae. We don't see a lot of fungal development in a row crop situation, but this higher lignin residue, especially if we were in a cornfield, if you see that white stringy, and thank you, Zeb, that's an example of it, that's helping to break down that cover crop. That fungal hyphae breaks down that high lignin material. When we talk about residue, we're always interested in carbon to nitrogen ratio, and we won't get into a discussion on how much nitrogen we need to convert X number of pounds of organic biomass, but there is a conversion factor to determine. The more lignin it is, or the more woody it is, the more dependent we are on this fungal hyphae. And from there it progresses up the food chain to a bacterial community, and then the earthworms, the microarthropods, and all the spiders and everything else that's involved. But this is kind of in the first steps of a decomposition here, cycling those nutrients. That's very important because that's our fertilizer warehouse. Now this isn't an organic production because we've got some commercial fertility involved, but this is where it starts right here.
So that's not a cause for concern. That's a good thing when you're starting to see that.
Yes, sir. That's a very good thing. You know, the other thing that we're noticing is that keeps a lot of stability. And in other crops other than cotton, fungal development on leaves or the fruiting parts of a row crop, peanuts, for example, is very important. Matter of fact, one of our largest cost of productions in peanuts here in this part of the world is on fungicide applications. If we can get enough of this beneficial fungi operating in our biological system, it has a way of kind of regulating the harmful funguses that hurt or determine our yields. But this is certainly a beneficial here.
Okay. I'm just curious, Zeb, how much, we talk about biomass, roots, organic matter. Have you been able to increase your organic matter levels in these fields?
We're seeing our organic matter increase. It's not by leaps and bounds. I've heard folks that are able to increase it dramatically more than what we are, but over the last probably 5 to 6 years, we'll see a couple tenths of an increase on fields that we're doing a really good job with managing our cover crops, making sure we have, you know, proper crop rotation, and just not being cotton all the time or corn all the time or, you know, soy all the time. Okay. But those, you know, the fields where we're putting the effort into it, making sure that we're doing our part, yes sir, we're seeing some increase in organic matter.
Well, that's a realistic. I always get concerned when someone says they've increased it by 1%. I'm not sure that it takes organic matter to generate organic matter. You got to grow it before it can become part of the soil. Now, one final thing here, Will. I hear you can use your sense of smell to tell me about the soil, whether it's healthy or not. Have you had anybody ever tell you that?
Yes. One of the things, you know, as far as a soil's background in my career, you know, we have to make determinations on land usage. A lot of times in a marginal site where it may be a wetland or an area near a wetland, we sometimes smell that foul odor. And basically that foul odor we're smelling is a hydrogen sulfide gas. That soil is going through a process called anaerobiosis. And basically what it's doing is depleting or oxidizing off the hydrogen sulfide. That soil's not functioning properly because there's very little oxygen there. It's a low oxygen environment. Well, obviously, if we've got something living here, these cotton plants are just like us. This biology in the soil is just like us. It has to have oxygen. So the more oxygen friendly or oxygen abundance we see in a soil, that we don't smell that foul odor. The next thing is when we start to accumulate carbon in this rhizosphere, we start to smell that sweet smell. You know, back when guys did a lot of moldboard plowing in a conventional system in the springtime, that sweet smell would be basically the carbon that's oxidizing on that. So if we were to take this soil and smell it, we don't have that foul rotten egg smell that we have with anaerobiosis. But we have a smell that basically it's not foul and is kind of a sweeter smell. We won't smell it today based on the heat and because this system is kind of in its maturity. If we were earlier in the season, back in April or late March, we could smell that biology starting to break down and working with that organic matter. This time of the year, like we said, we're August the 31st. The biology has slowed down quite a bit. It'll start to pick up along about October, November, when soil temperatures are cooler. The air temperatures are cooler as well, and we start to see a little more rainfall. So we'll start to smell that again. But one thing that yes, we can smell a good smell in that and see that this soil is functioning to some degree.
So the soil's supposed to have a good smell rather than or no smell. Okay.
And you can tell the difference.